Well, I thought I'd start us out with some cool jazz and kind of zoom in on that little car that you see on the bed of Tony's 201-2. What kind of car do you think it is? I'll give you two guesses. I'll give you one guess. Yeah, it's the Rolls Royce. That's actually a Phantom 2. And I thought I would pull it out of the mothballs and give you a closer look at the type of car back in the latter part of the 1940s going into the 1950s that the Singer 201 would have sewn the interior panels of that vehicle. And that's why almost a decade ago I was the first in the world to announce that the Singer sewing machine, the 201, is the Rolls Royce of Singer sewing machines. Yeah. There you go. All right, I'm going to move my little toy out of the way. It's actually kind of a cast car, so it's a nice little toy. I like it a lot. I like toys, don't you? Well, this is obviously Tony's 201-2. It's been a while since I've looked at this particular machine. I've been running around doing so many other things, unboxings, and you just name it, the list goes on. The workshop is buzzing like a beehive, which is good. I like to stay busy, and as I continue to get stronger and stronger every day, I tend to kind of pump my hours up a little bit. I'm sometimes in the workshop till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and starting generally fairly early in the morning as well. So that's the way I like to be. I like to be busy. Well, let me kind of show you. This is the finish line, and this is the machine. If you don't remember it, it had the lamp cord wiring and a number of other challenges. So I'm going to take us over to Facebook real quick. Especially for you YouTubers that do not do Facebook, so I can kind of show you the pilgrimage that I took with Tony's 201-2. And I still have to get to another machine of his as well. Our friendship started, and Tony, by the way, again, is an educator out in Ohio, out in the great state of Ohio. And the first machine that he sent to me was a Spartan. And that Spartan was really lacking a lot of power. And so I took it through my optimization process, sent the machine back to him, and he was so tickled pink about this renewed power in his Spartan that he ended up sending me two additional machines. One is this 201-2 that I just finished, and now I have to move on to his next machine, which is a 1591, both potted motors. But this is kind of where we started with this 201-2. You can kind of see this this lamp cord that it was wired up with, and that stuff was just not rated to supply steady, predictable power to this potted motor. So I ended up having to change out all the wiring on that leading up to the motor and change some of the other wiring as well just to upgrade it. So that's kind of what you see here is the motor is torn apart, and I'm taking it through a process of getting that wiring upgraded. So here we're looking at kind of the innards of the motor. The potted motor was a great innovation on the part of Singer. But it also has a tendency, because it's a closed space, out of sight, out of mind. People don't, and why would they as an owner? Why would you necessarily take apart your potted motor unless you're really, really bored and you need to find more sewing projects? But some people are into their machines, and when you start to get into your machines and you start to check out the wiring, all of a sudden you find out that the wiring is not up to par. Here you can see one of the motor leads that supplies the potted motor, all exposed wires. Also the sheathing of the wire to the right leading down is broken down as well. And just in general, the potted motor if it isn't taken through a deep cleaning and a maintenance schedule, I would say every couple of years, it's going to start to build up a lot of gook and a lot of junk. Again, motors on machines, whether they're potted or otherwise, act like a vacuum cleaner, and everything in that environment, whether it's pet related stuff, if there's a smoker in the household, if there's just general dust and dirt and all the other stuff, it all gets sucked into that motor, and eventually through those electrical fields, it kind of fuses to all of those contact points, and you start to see a degrading of the motor. So that's another part of the process that I took Tony's machine through as well, is very, very detailed cleaning inside of that motor, and also insulating all of the wire points as well, replacing them if needed, and just bringing that motor back up to a quality standard. And here you're just seeing another side of the potted motor. The point that I try to make in sharing these photos, is there are so many intricate parts of any electric motor, in particular the 0.6 amp potted motor that you'll typically find on the 201-2. There are some with a 0.5 amp motor as well, and the same is true of the 1591. But there are so many areas of that motor that need attention if you want to have a motor that's optimized. Even those little interlacing wires that you can see right there that are part of that electrical field that feed into the motor, each one of those has to be cleaned. Every single point that is copper, every point that has metal and electricity flowing through it has to be optimized if you want that machine to be running at the top of its game. Which every machine that leaves this workshop, that's what my goal process is driven by, is getting that machine to the absolute optimal performance that that machine can do. And every machine is different. One 201-2 that's optimized might be at a plateau of, say, and I'm talking on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. One that's optimized in this workshop, a 201-2, might hit that plateau of an 8. Another one might, in spite of all of my efforts and intervention, might only hit a 7. But another one that has been maintained over the life of the machine until it comes to me, I might be able to get that machine up to a 9 or maybe a 10. But the goal is always to get it to that running level that's going to give that machine peak performance. And I should clarify my scaling of saying 1 to 10. Some of those machines that left the factory when they were brand spanking new were probably only at about a 7. Again, when you're mass producing a machine, even a 201-2, there are certain things that can be missed, and there are certain quality standards that may be different. Kind of like buying that car on a Wednesday versus a Friday. You know, the argument is buy the car that's on a Wednesday or a Monday because people are still fresh and their mind is in the work that they're doing. When they get to Friday, they're kind of thinking about the weekend, and that car that is made on a Friday versus a Wednesday or a Monday may not be up to par. It may not be of exactly the same quality standards. Every business generally is going to have a QA department, but there are inevitably variations in the quality of how that machine performs, whether it's an automobile or whether it's a sewing machine. So my machines that are optimized tend to outperform machines, even the ones that were leaving the factory. And I've gotten that feedback again. That's not just bravado. I've gotten that feedback from people that have contacted me, like Frank that we did the interview with, Frank Wilson, many months ago, and he and other people that were working intimately with Singer, and many of them even were going door to door selling the machines and demonstrating them in the household that they were trying to sell the machine to, have told me your machines perform better than the ones that I was demonstrating back in the day. So that's always the goal, just like with Tony's. All right, blah, 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 blah. So here again is another shot of the innards of the motor and all of those metal contacts that you can see, you know, here, 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 here. and this surface as well that is copper. All of that has to be deep cleaned and conditioned. And here you can see down towards the bottom of the screen, I'll try to zoom in on it for you. Here you can see another wiring point where the soldering is kind of degraded a little bit, and also the wiring and the sheathing of the wiring is a little bit broken down, and those are again areas that have to be serviced. And I should have pointed out above as well, you can see kind of all the gook and gunk that gets sucked into that motor. And here you can see part of the reason I tear down the potted motors is, again, they're kind of enclosed and they tend to build up heat, and then the sheathing or the wrap around the wires tends to break down, like here where you can see there's actually a bare wire that has to be properly insulated and if necessary replaced. So like I said before, the things that we can't see, they're kind of out of sight, out of mind, they can hurt us. Especially these potted motors, there are so many points of servicing, that areas that have to be addressed. It just blows your mind when you start to really dig into a motor and you see all the areas that need attention. And here again you're seeing, I said it in the post on Facebook when I shared these photos. Electrical tape is a wonderful thing, but it's not a permanent solution. It's not a permanent repair. It's a temporary repair. And when I dug into Tony's motor and his foot controller and everything else electrical, I found that in many cases where there should have been a permanent repair done, which I ended up doing, there was electrical tape, like up here, that is holding a wire together basically. Up here we've got exposed copper wire sticking through. Down here we have exposed copper wire sticking through. And the only solution for the person that serviced Tony's potted motor at some point was to use electrical tape. Never, ever, ever a permanent solution, because electrical tape, as sticky as it may be when you put it on, it over time loses that stickiness, and whatever you've been trying to safeguard and protect will eventually come loose. And that's how people end up contacting me and saying, I'm getting shocked when I'm pushing on the foot controller and I'm making contact with the machine at the same time. That's because people are doing improper repairs. It's just not a good idea. Not a good idea. Here again you can see that electrical tape, and you can see exposed wire at the top right of the shot. And just a lot of gook. This is all gook down here in the motor housing as well. And here you can see, and again, Facebook photos, I haven't figured out the science of Facebook photos yet, so they're always out of order typically, but here you can see the way the motor was originally wired with this lamp cord. Lamp cord is generally, because you're only talking about typically a 50 watt or a 75 watt bulb, even if it's a 100 watt bulb, it's not going to be pulling the amps that a motor like this does. And even though a motor might only be rated at 0.6 amps, as you're pushing that foot controller, there's going to be an infusion of electricity through that motor and down that wiring that's going to far exceed what the running capacity of that motor is. That's just the nature of electricity. It's like opening a floodgate of the dam. And so you've got to make sure that that wiring is rated at an amperage that will allow for that influx of the electricity. All of the wiring I use is rated at a minimum of 10 amps. Excuse me. And here you can see again an improper repair that someone did to Tony's motor. This is all soldering that they just buried the wire and the metal contact with, and all of that had to be removed. The problem, and I shared this on Facebook, the problem with just bathing an area like that with soldering, with hot solder basically, is that hot solder, as I show in one of my shots with my heat gun, that solder is hitting between 300 to 600 degrees. It could even get hotter depending on the solder gun you're using. And what that does is that copper wiring is not designed to withstand a lot of heat. And as you're putting layer upon layer upon layer of soldering on that wire coming off the motor and then the wire lead that you're introducing to it, you're basically packing that area with layer upon layer of intense heat until that solder cools. It's almost like the concept of putting together a compost pile. A compost pile breaks down all the stuff you put in it because there's basically the decaying of the stuff you put in there, and then there's heat generated, and then it continues the process of breaking all of that stuff down. Heat is a wonderful thing if it's in the right place, but heat is not the place to be putting inside of the potted motor when you're redoing the wiring with this many layers of soldering. It actually causes the wire, like the copper wire at the top, and then the original standard wiring that's coming off the motor, to actually degrade and to become brittle. So you complete a repair and you don't realize it, but you've actually broken down that wire to a point where you're going to potentially cause a major safety issue in that motor once you button it all up. So don't if you're going to use soldering on something, don't just bury the stuff in solder, because all of that heat is going to cause whatever wiring you're joining together to become brittle and break down. And here you can see, you know, you use what you have, whatever's within reach. So what I've done here is, as I'm servicing this motor, I've got a very vintage camera that I'm resting that motor on, because I don't want the weight of that motor to be hanging down and to be pulling on the wires. So I've got it balanced on top of my vintage camera. Similar camera that was probably used back in the day when JFK sadly was assassinated. That's the type of camera that would have been used, just as an aside note. So this is the other motor lead that someone tried to repair. And again, just like the other one, you can see there's a combination of electrical tape right there that they've used as a permanent repair, which it should not have been done. And then here, again, they're just burying that copper wire, and also the standard motor wire. Standard motor wire, you can see, is not a standard copper type motor. It's another copper wire. It's another type of wire that they would have used commonly in making the motors back in the day. And this individual, whoever did it, has just buried this area of wiring that they're joining together with solder, believing that more is better. Well, it's not. Because what you're doing is, again, you're building up so much heat by those layers and layers and layers of solder. As you're applying it, you're actually causing that wire to become very brittle. And here you can see signs of that a little bit right there, where you only have a few strands of that original motor wiring that are actually still there. So don't do that, folks. More is not better, just like when you're oiling your machines. Burying your machine in oil is not a good thing. So here I'm just beginning to heat up my soldering iron. I've got it kind of resting on my little magnetic tray there. And it's not even at full temperature yet. And this is my point about burying wiring in soldering. Multiple layers of it. I'm just beginning to get a reading on my soldering iron. And we're already at 354 degrees. And it's not even at full temperature yet. So that's my point, is you know, doing the type of repair that whoever this person was, where they just bury the wiring and soldering, is not a good idea. They're actually setting themselves up to a point where they could actually cause a safety or even a fire hazard. That's just another shot of the same wiring, just to show you again kind of the mass of solder that they just buried that wiring in. I guess if you don't know, you don't know. So here I'm beginning to, and it's a very tedious process if you've never had to remove soldering before. Putting soldering on is not a real difficult thing. You get that soldering iron nice and hot, and you apply your solder to the points that you're joining together, and it's fairly easy to you know, to put, you know, a solder point on. But when you've got this much solder caked on like this individual did, you've got to basically strip layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, so you eventually can get down to the wiring and then properly join those wires together. And you can see here I'm beginning to have some progress. At the very top of the shot there, you can see a portion of the coppering wire that is still attached to that solder point that eventually I'm going to be breaking free, and then using a proper procedure to make that motor safe. So there's kind of what you end up with, is just a rat's nest of wiring that is so brittle because it's been impacted by all the heat. There you can see the original lead coming out of the motor that had to be addressed because, you know, it's become very brittle. And then all of this other wiring up here, that's a combination of the original motor wiring and also some of the copper wiring that they tried to join to it. But it's just a mess, and it's also very hazardous. And here I'm kind of holding part of that solder point so I can use the soldering iron with the other hand to strip it off. It was a big job, folks. I think you're getting that impression. So finally I've gotten all of that old soldering off, and we're down to the bare leads. A solid lead here coming off of the motor that also has to be insulated, obviously. And then we have the new lead that's coming into the picture here that has to be wired into the motor. And then eventually those are going to be joined with a wire nut that's insulated. And inside of that wire nut is a special adhesive that I use that is resistant to oil, it's resistant to heat, so that that wiring nut can't ever come loose inside of that motor. It's basically, it's welded to the wires inside of that wiring nut. And there's that special adhesive right there. It's not a standard silicone, it's a special adhesive that I use. And again, it's got to be in that environment. It's got to be resistant to oil and resistant to heat as well. And there's one of the wiring nuts right there. It's already got the adhesive on it. It's been put on, and that is a permanent repair for Tony's potted motor, unlike the electrical tape and the excessive soldering that was on there before. And also any of the points of the wiring that were a little bit broken down have been re-insulated as well. And here you can see I've got the new wire that's coming in from the rear of the motor and the new wire that's coming off of the motor itself. And I've got them wrapped together, and I'm getting ready to put that wiring nut on there with that special adhesive. Doesn't that look a lot better? We still don't have all of this electrical tape taken off yet, because then that electrical tape that's down below there, can you see that? All that has to be removed. And then that has to be insulated as well. And I use a special, it is a type of heat and oil resistant epoxy to seal all of those areas as well. And then we're getting a lot closer to the motor being back in a state where it can deliver maximum power. It's also not going to be a potential fire hazard. And these are part of the arc wraps that come off of the motor, and those tend to get real, they get brittle as well. The original coating on them starts to degrade, and it starts to expose the wire wraps that are inside of there, and so all of that has to be resealed as well. And all this electrical tape up here has to be removed. And that's what I'm in the process of doing right there, is getting all that electrical tape off of the motor that someone had put on there. And there you can see me with a Q-tip applying that special oil and heat resistant epoxy over the top of this wiring arch. There's 2 wiring arches on the potted motor, and the top, the sides, the bottom, all of that needs to be properly sealed, which insulates the wire and prevents it from being affected by the oil in the environment and everything and degrading again. So it's a permanent solution to encasing all of that. And here you can see me with the scissors. I'm carefully trying to remove the electrical tape that was applied to different points of the potted motor. There's kind of a close-up of it. And you can also see my new wiring coming in right here. And again, my wiring at a minimum is going to be rated at 10 amps, which gives you a big enough buffer even as you get that big influx of electricity that's flowing into the machine, which will at points exceed the amperage of the motor. You're rock solid as far as the wiring being able to handle that. And here you can see why I was applying that special oil and heat resistant epoxy. That's the condition that they were trying to repair with electrical tape. That's what happens to those wraps in the potted motor. They just degrade over time because of the heat and the oil. And someone had thought, oh, I'll just wrap electrical tape around it. That's a temporary solution. It's not a permanent one. My oil and heat resistant epoxy is a permanent repair. And here we have a motor that is really coming together nicely. We've got brand new wiring nuts on here, which have that special adhesive on the inside so that they never come loose. We've got brand new wiring coming in from the rear of the motor, wiring coming in from the motor itself, and then we've taken all of these wiring arches on both sides and we've sealed them from top to bottom with that special oil and heat resistant epoxy. Plus obviously all of this motor area up here that is so central to the machine, all of this area up here that's so central to the motor being able to perform at an optimal level, all those nooks and crannies are cleaned, conditioned, and brought to a point where they're able to perform at their peak. So here you can see down here on the bottom, I think you can in the shot, that's that special oil resistant, there we go, that special oil resistant epoxy that has been applied to this side of the wiring arch and this side as well to seal all that up so that there's no possibility of any electricity leaking out. Again, electricity is like water. If you've got bare leads and bare wires and everything else, you're going to have electricity leaking out, which you know, in extreme cases can be very hazardous, but it also just degrades the performance of the motor. And here, again, they're not in order. This is the old wiring that was on the motor, a lamp cord style wiring that is definitely not rated to be powering a potted motor. It's fine for a lamp, but it's not fine for an electrical motor like this. And here I'm just continuing to remove all of the old wiring and then go through the process of upgrading it to proper wiring. And you remember I showed you before in the motor itself we had some exposed wires that were coming to the main points of the motor. And I'm just in the process now of sealing those and making sure that that there's no risk of them grounding out on the metal housing of the motor and then shocking Tony as he operates the machine. Excuse me. So I think that's the finish line. I've done all of the motor work. Everything has been upgraded. The motor has been cleaned. You can even see in the housing back here where you may not have noticed, but in the housing in the rear of the motor there, it was just caked in carbon from the motor running with the carbon brushes. And all of that is clean now as well. So we've got a properly wired and an optimized motor that is just going to blow the socks off of Tony, just like the work that I did on his Spartan originally when we met. And he'll be really, really excited about what this 201-2 can deliver now. So there's just kind of a distance shot kind of showing you how busy the workbench gets as I'm doing multiple things simultaneously. Even this little container back here, you can see it almost looks like a baking container, which I think it is. But that's part of what I use in the process is I pull those motor parts apart and I bathe them and I clean them and I condition them to get all the junk off of every little nook and cranny of that motor. And that's it. That's the shot. And I'll go through these fairly quick. These are just additional shots showing more of the restorative steps that I took Tony's machine through. These are clean worm gears that are interlacing on the bottom of the 201-2. Most people don't even know that they exist because they're on either end of the machine, and the pedestal feet that the machine sets on basically encapsulates these worm gears that, again, when most people have a machine for years and years and years, and certainly if you take it into a local service center, they're not going to go to the work of removing those parts to expose these worm gears so that they can be properly cleaned and greased so that that machine is optimized. But I mean, that's just a normal thing that I do. And this is another area of the 201-2 that a lot of people are not aware of. It's below the raceway area, and there's more interlacing worm gears in there that have to be cleaned and then degreased as well. And you might notice at the bottom of the right of the screen, I've got a mirror. It's because as you're taking different pieces off of that, you've got to see the little spaces where the screws are, and it's kind of a blind spot. So I use a mirror, and it helps quite a bit. Just a closer shot, you can see me putting my special grease in there and packing that area out so that, you know, again, once I take a 201-2 through my process, it's not going to need to go through that process again for many, many, many years, even with heavy use. And there you can kind of see the that space where the worm gears are. Again, an area that most people never even service, never look at because they don't know about it. It's now repacked with fresh grease and it's ready to get the job done. And I showed you this on the opening shot of those worm gears on the bottom of the machine. Here I'm actually applying my special grease to those worm gears once they've been cleaned. Notice all that area has been cleaned. You can't just put grease on top of dirty worm gears and expect that machine to perform at an optimal level. You got to strip them all the way down and then get that grease into all of those interlacing grooves of the worm gear. It's a very tedious process. And there are some happy worm gears that are going to perform real well. And more importantly, as you have metal going against metal where these gears are spinning at a high revolution, you're not going to be having those worm gears start to degrade and chip as they can do as they're, you know, basically punching into each other at a high rate of speed as the machine is fired up. It protects them so that those worm gears will last for the lifetime of the machine and also not generate any drag or friction so that that machine can perform at the top of its game. And yes, one person commented on Facebook, they basically said, and I turned around and asked them a question back, which they never responded to. They said, so you're applying grease and oil to that same area. And I said, basically turning the question back on them, not to be sassy, but because this is a classroom, and sometimes I am the instructor, sometimes I'm the student as different people are sharing things with me. But I wanted to turn the question back on this individual so that they would think through the process, you know, kind of reason through it a little bit on their own and say, okay, why would we apply some sort of a lubricant to the grease area as well? Well, even though that person never answered me back when I posed the question, you know, and saying to them, well, why would you add oil to the grease that's in that area? The reason you do that is inevitably grease will, as liquid form as it is when you put it on, it eventually will, the moisture in it will wick out and it will dry up. And that's when you see, you know, if you've ever serviced your own machine or you've looked at some of my pictures I posted on Facebook, you'll look at that old oil and it almost looks like it's glass, like it's caramelized, it's crusted. And that's because it's lost its moisture factor. By adding just a little bit of machine oil or kerosene to those points that have the special grease on them, you add additional moisture that mixes in with that grease and extends the life of it significantly. So there's your answer. That person that asked a question never responded to my question. I think that's a little bit rude, but you know, maybe they never went back to the question. I have no idea. But hold on a second. I forgot to silence my phone. Sorry about that. So what you're seeing here is one of the pedestal feet that had to be removed to get to those worm gears. And again, it's like putting a new oil in a car and then leaving the dirty oil filter on the car. Anything that's going to be in proximity to those worm gears has to be cleaned. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, is I'm cleaning that pedestal assembly so that when I put it back on over the top of those beautiful, clean, properly lubricated and greased worm gears, I'm not going to be introducing dirt and grime and grease to that all over again and undoing all of my work. So here, just again, detailed cleaning. Dirt is not the friend of our vintage sewing machines. So I'm stripping down all of the oil and grease and varnishing that's on the needle bar and also the presser foot bar as well. Just continue to do that process. And there we have a very nice looking, clean needle bar, presser foot bar. And again, it's not just, oh, isn't it pretty? Look at how clean it is. Better Homes and Gardens, yay. No, it's not that at all. It's that grease and oil and varnishing and all the other stuff holds your machine back. So you want to get all of that stuff off the machine, because even if it's not in direct contact with a pivot point or a friction point, it's going to eventually migrate somewhere else on that machine. It's like a cancer. So you get it all off of there so that it can't contaminate some other part of your machine. And here we're working in the area of the raceway, getting the shuttle clean, getting the feed dogs clean, and also getting where that feed dog cover and the needle cover sit, getting all of those tracks cleaned out, because there's a lot of gook and grime, as you'll see in some of these close-up shots. See that? That gets in there, and then all of a sudden you're trying to, let's say the bobbin plate, you're trying to open and close it, and you're like, daggone it, this is really tough to slide open and to close. It's because all that stuff gets in there, and when you get it out of the way, boy oh boy does that work well. Plus, the reason you do it on this side where the needle plate is that covers the feed dogs is because you may not notice it. It might be thousandths of an inch. But as that stuff starts to build up underneath that, that plate that goes over the feed dogs, it will actually cause that plate to be higher up than it should be, and will actually reduce the effectiveness of your feed dogs in being able to pull that material through, because it's just like on the Slant-O-Matic machines that have that throat plate where it'll raise it all the way up. You remember seeing those on the channel? This has to be down flush where it's designed to be, otherwise it'll be higher up and will reduce how much those feed dogs and how evenly those feed dogs can pull. And there you can see we've defeated the enemy. That's kind of our sword of justice as we remove all of that junk. And yes, I go through a lot of Q-tip swabs and cosmetic pads, and that's okay. Excuse me. Also, again, the detailed cleaning of even the presser foot attachments, top, bottom, sides, and everything else, getting all the junk off of them so that they can do their job. And there's what a presser foot should look like. Properly cleaned, not just, oh, isn't it pretty? But also the bottom has been cleaned and conditioned as well so that it can work against that material and with the feed dogs to move that material through evenly. Faceplate area, just doing a lot of detailed cleaning and lubrication and some adjustments in there as well. And now we've got everything put back together. And again, this is the area I was talking about, this plate over here. Why do we clean underneath that? It's so that that plate can be all the way down, flush as it's supposed to be, so that those feed dogs are at the proper level and they can do their job effectively. Plus, look at all this up here. That is a Better Homes and Gardens statement. Oh, my shot isn't wide enough. You know, that's the way we want it to look, especially for a Rolls Royce of Singers sewing machines, for goodness sakes. And there's the faceplate. You may not be able to see it real clear in the shot, but it's kind of dingy looking. It's got varnishing on it towards the bottom there. You may be able to see that. I'm not sure if you can. Sort of. And again, it's not just that you want a shiny faceplate, but get rid of all the dirt you can from your machine. And there's what a faceplate should look like. And you don't just clean the front of it that people can see. You clean the inside, you clean the edges, you clean all the different points on it, including underneath where my thumb is, where there's a thread guide. You also want to be cleaning that thread guide as well, because that thread is moving through there very rapidly. And if there's gook or dirt or other things built up in there, it's going to inhibit the flow of that thread coming down to the needle. So you clean this point as well, and make sure that that's all free. And there's Dr. Singer inspecting my work, and he kind of looks pleased. I think I did okay. And there's our upper tension control. You can kind of see how it started. And again, any of those videos you see on YouTube or otherwise that say all you got to do is just take, you know, blah 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 and swab between the discs, the pressure discs on the upper tension. This is all the stuff that you miss if you buy into that lie. You got to disassemble the upper tension completely and clean every part of it, including the springs as well that go into the motor and go into the machine housing. And there's a tension control torn all the way down, and every single part of that is clean. Parts that need to be lubricated are lubricated, and that's the way it needs to be done. Also, this inside cavity area has to be cleaned as well, because you're going to be putting a spring back in there that has to do a lot of work for releasing that thread to continue sewing, and it's going to be inhibited if you don't go through that cleaning effort. So here, again, it's hard to see maybe in the shot, but the tension, yeah, I guess you can see it. The upper tension disc on the left has been properly cleaned. The one on the right is the original, as it was. So you can see the sharp contrast where, because it's rounded on the edges in that, the way the discs are engineered, swabbing something in between the discs is going to miss so much. That's why you have to clean the upper tension assembly properly. And even the outer parts of it, like this locking component that holds the assembly together, you've got to get all of that varnishing off as well. And there's part of that detailed cleaning process of getting in there where the assembly is going to be mounted. And now we're starting to put it back together. And you can see the parts are going to look a lot different. Here you can see on the right side of the screen where that spring between all the little flex crevices and everything has been cleaned. On the left, and including this as well, has not been cleaned. You can see all the varnishing and gook and junk and dirt that's still on there. And I'm not doing this to be, for lack of a better word, not to be, you know, anal or anything like that, but that's how detailed my process is. That's why I refer to it as a surgical process. And there's a take-up spring that works in that upper tension assembly that's properly cleaned and conditioned. And again, you are not, folks, you're very smart, but don't believe for a second that if you take it into a local service center and you pay them $100 to $150, that they're going to go to this level of optimizing your machine and cleaning it. Never going to happen. So here's our upper assembly for upper tension that is back together and it's ready to get the job done. Also the components inside of the faceplate as well that are properly cleaned. And here I'm just showing you a shot of how bright that LED light is. I took the liberty of replacing Tony's old bulb. It's an incandescent 25 watt original bulb with one of my high-powered LED lights that puts out about 4 times as much light with virtually no heat at all. And here I'm just doing some touch-up on the body of the machine. Nothing super intense, but just getting some of that old oil and varnishing off of Tony's machine. And you can see the evidence of that on the cosmetic pad. That's all the stuff that, you know, basically contaminates the environment of the machine, because again, it's not just going to stay on the paint, it's going to migrate around eventually and get into the motor and everything else. And there you can see a very happy 201-2. It's looking now like it's the Rolls Royce of Singers sewing machines, isn't it? That's a 201-2 that's ready to get the job done, and also getting ready to just wow the world and say, yeah, look at me. Oh, more importantly, look at my owner who got me to the, you know, helped to get me to this level. So Tony is very smart. Tony was smart when he sent his first machine, the Spartan, the 192K, and because he was so pleased with what I did for him there, he turned around and sent me 2 more machines. And that's incredible testimony as to how different my process is. All right. Blah, 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 blah. So let's get to some sewing finally after taking you through those shots. I do want to take you through shots like that though, because those of you that don't do Facebook but you're on YouTube and you're a faithful follower of YouTube, and hopefully you're a subscriber of YouTube as well on my channel. Hint, hint, poke, poke. If you didn't watch a recent premiere where I talked about the analytics and shared with everyone that watches the videos in that 80% of the people that come to this channel regularly, frequently, and watch a ton of videos are not subscribed. Subscribe, please. All right, let's get down to the needle finally, and we'll see not only if Tony's machine, after going through all of that, looks fabulous, but also if it sews fabulously as well. All right, let me turn that screen around. And we will start with no music, and then I might introduce a little bit more music as we're going on, okay? And I think my music theme today is kind of built around jazz, and I love jazz. I don't know about any of you, but I love jazz a lot. So the first thing we're going to sew off on is this this toe strap, for lack of a better word. It's basically a nylon webbing. And again, this has a tensile rating of about 1,200 to 2,000 pounds. I have different styles of this nylon webbing, and I don't remember if this one is the 1,200 pound or the 2,000 pound. But whatever it is, let's just say it's real strong stuff. And also, as you look at it, you can kind of see the catacombing design of it that right away says to a needle and to a machine, good luck, buddy. Good luck trying to get through this. Well, don't give Tony's machine a challenge, because it is going to step up to that challenge and definitely get the job done. All right, here we go. I just sewed over my own my own thread. Oh, gumdrops. Did I? Yeah, I sure did. I literally sewed over my own thread. Okay, well, let's go back the other way and we'll just ignore that. That is the weirdest thing. I don't think I've done that in a while. All right, to the finish, and I'll give it a little bit of gas just to evidence again. One of Tony's main concerns was, I really want to have some power back into this 201-2 like he did for the Spartan. Well, let's see how we do. That's about less than a quarter of the way down. Less than a quarter of the way down. I sure did. That's hilarious. On this side, can you see in the camera? On this side right here, that thread popped up from the rear, and I literally sewed it to the material down. That is so weird. I can't think of the last time that happened. So this top stitch is a combination of a gorgeous stitch and also the thread piece that I sewed over. And then at the bottom point here you can see the stitching as well, the lower row that we did, which is absolutely picture perfect. A little bit hard to see the pink against the yellow, but it's gorgeous. And here we've got our lock stitch, which also is just absolutely spot on. So a definite pass in spite of my sewing technique with that nylon webbing, and definitely going to give it a thumbs up. Okay, what should I do next? Why don't we slide over to some genuine elk hide, and I'll slide this into position here. If you're new to this channel, let me just turn it to the side a little bit so you can see the side of it. This is probably about 4 or 5 ounces of genuine elk hide. It's chemically processed, and it's incredibly difficult stuff to get through, but not for my machines. And Tony's machine is going to be able to get this job done, I think, very easily and lay down a beautiful stitch. And when it comes to sewing a material like this, it's really an evidence of where that machine is at now versus how it was when it came into the workshop, where it would have struggled to get a job done like this. All right, here we go. A single layer of genuine elk hide. Oh, I got so excited I went too far. Daggone it. Gumdrops. Well, that'll be a little bit wonky, but I did better that time. All right, let's head down to the finish now. Then I'm back on the material, and we'll see how Tony's machine does. Again, this is the equivalent of probably a belt with a genuine elk hide, and yet listen to this machine, how easily it runs, how easily it gets the job done now. You can hear me kind of playing with the foot control a little bit, barely even a quarter of the way down. There's so much reserve power now with Tony's 201-2, it's absolutely insane. He's going to have to really, really hold it back because it's going to be very enthusiastic about doing whatever he wants it to do. So here's our single layer of genuine elk hide. I'm going to try to zoom in on this just so you can see it a little bit easier. Although that's not a horrible shot, but I do like to get closer on the material when I can. So there's our stitching right there. The spacing, the formation is absolutely spot on, even where I went off the material. And there you can see our top row. Absolutely. Oh, there's a hole. That's kind of cool. I'm glad I missed the hole. That would have been interesting. But you can see the spacing, the formation, the presentation of the stitch. And look at, again, the thickness of that on top. Those of you that are regular followers have seen that a million times, but if you're new to this channel, that's an idea of how strong Tony's machine is now, that it can sew through genuine elk hide like this, that's basically as thick as a belt, and do it just absolutely effortlessly. And there's our bottom row, which is absolutely spot on. The spacing, the formation, the integrity of the stitch. It just doesn't get any better than that, folks. It just doesn't get any better. Let's turn it over and take a look at the lock stitch. And the good thing about this elk hide is you can actually see the lock stitch. Some of the leathers that I sew, it's like really, really tough because of the nap to see that lock stitch. Hopefully I've got that angled right. Let me just adjust it a little bit. There we go. I think that's a little bit better. Or worse. It might be better or worse. So here's our lock stitch. And there's our top row right there, which is absolutely spot on. Those are gorgeous lock stitches. And our turn stitches are outstanding. There's another hole. And just the stitch formation and the integrity of the stitch is just absolutely exactly as we want to see it. So this single layer of genuine elk hide, about 4 or 5 ounces of leather, is an absolute pass. Just gorgeous, gorgeous stitching by this machine. By this Rolls Royce machine. Be specific, Scott, be specific. Okay, what are we going to sew off now? And more importantly, will I put on some music to irritate those people that don't like music when we're sewing? I'll just turn it way down. Let's do some, the first one I played, by the way, the introduction is called Crack the Case. And this next one is called Blues Infusion. And I'm going to turn it way down. Oh, I love this music. I went down to see my buddy from the Army in New Orleans, and we went through, you know, all the areas where they play the fabulous music, and I just, oh my gosh, I never wanted to leave. I never wanted to leave. Something magical about New Orleans, something magical about jazz and blues. And no, it's not because I played the trumpet. Hello. All right, should we do this nightmare material? You remember this stuff I showed in a recent premiere with Debbie from Pennsylvania's machine? And I'm totally blanking on what we... Let's see, it wasn't the 1591. What was it? It was a FOF, right? Yeah, I think it was a FOF that we sewed this on. And it just was a nightmare. It was like, oh my gosh, I hate this stuff. Because it's got the suede, basically, material on the back, which is really super slippery. And then it's got this vinyl type coating on it that looks like leather on top. It's kind of a leather vinyl. But, oh my gosh, it's just a nightmare to sew. So we're going to, because we like challenges, we're going to go back to this stuff again on Tony's 201-2, and we'll see how it does. Here we go. Whoops. Hold on a second, I got to rethread. I just broke my thread. Oh, the fun of doing things live, right? Well, that's okay. We're all about being real on this channel. And it also gives me an opportunity, as I'm rethreading Tony's 201-2, to point out that when you're setting this machine up to sew, you want to make sure that the flat side of the needle is to the left. And then you're going to be threading this 201-2 from right to left. Bear with me for a second as I thread the needle, which I may get my magnifiers on because it's not always easy to see, even with that great LED light. It's not always easy to get that through the eye of the needle. Any of you that are getting older as well are like, yep, I know what you're saying, buddy. I know what you're saying. Let me just clip that thread on the end so we have a clean end to go through. Yeah, I must have pulled that thread through and got it snagged up a little bit, and it caused a little bit of unraveling, and that's fine. And also I'll mention, as we get this set back up real quick here, when you're putting the bobbin into the 201-2, you want to make sure when you're inserting it that you're inserting it so that the bobbin is going to unwind clockwise. And by that, I'll just hold it down here. By that, I mean, as you're holding the bobbin like this, the bobbin should be turning to the right clockwise. So you'll have the thread coming underneath the bottom as you drop it in, and then the bobbin will be turning like this. Make sense? Okay. Now we're going to get back to business. See why I hate this material? Whenever I'm using this new material that I've introduced, something weird always happens. It's like the material is just really trying to put me to the test. Doggone stuff. So let's try this again and see if we can buzz down without having something funky happening. You behave now, you naughty, naughty material. Here we go. And I even stopped in the right spot. Yay. All right, let's do our turn. Needle down. And down to the finish. With nothing weird happening, you nasty, nasty material, you. Here we go. Well, that's okay. We're okay with challenges, right? That's why people love this channel, and I'm so grateful for it. They're like, this guy does not put on any act. I mean, we see exactly what is happening. He doesn't do like a distant shot and make us guess. He always gets, gets up close and personal, so we can see exactly what he's seeing at the workbench. And that is my goal. I want you guys to be a part of what's happening and to be able to see it without anything getting in your way. I'm trying to get some fluff off of this. There we go. All right, so let's take a look at these stitches on this nightmare material. Blah, 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 blah. And we'll see how Tony's 201-2 did battling this evil, evil material that put Debbie's FOF. Yeah, it was a FOF 332. All right, I'm back. Put Debbie's FOF 332 to the test. And even though it's evil material, it could not defeat Tony's machine. Look at how gorgeous that stitch is. The spacing, the formation, everything about that stitch is absolutely spot on. Just look at the surface of that material and it just says nightmare, doesn't it? Looks like alligator skin or something. Maybe that's what I should call it, is alligator skin. So let's look at the lock stitch, which, because this stuff has that suede on the back, it's almost like a furry suede. It's going to be a little bit tough for us to see. We're going to see what we can see. I'm hoping it'll, hoping it'll stay up. I might have to use my clips here. Yeah, it's not quite the right angle. All right, let's see what we can see. This is going to be tough. It's just like some of the leathers where that nap just really, really masks the stitch and it's hard to see. But you know what? It's hard to match a gorgeous stitch like this. Look at how beautiful that is popping through. Just absolutely spot on. Even amid this nightmare suede material that gave Debbie Gavin's FOF 332 such a challenge. And there at the bottom I could pull it back, but you can kind of see it popping through there where the nap isn't quite as bad. So this is a definite pass, even though it gave me a hard time at the first attempt and we had to quickly rethread the machine. Ultimately we got a stitch output that is just spectacular. So I'm going to throw that to the back as a definite pass, and we're going to move on to the next material that we're going to sew. Go over that real quick. So I think what we'll sew next is some canvas binding tape, and you don't see this stuff very often. Matter of fact, you haven't seen it on the channel for quite a while. And this stuff is the epitome of a challenge for a machine. Trust me, it really is. So I'm going to put on a little bit of soft music in the background. The last one we just heard is called Blues Infusion. This time we're going to play Front Porch Blues. We played this one before. I'm loving this. So this is the canvas binding tape I'm talking about. You see the canvas on top, glossy, slippery, nasty stuff. And then we've got a backing on the back of it as well that really makes this stuff tough. This is used in a lot of commercial settings as kind of an edging to finish off furniture and stuff like that. So it's really designed for durability and it's tough stuff. Doing one layer would be enough. Doing two is a little bit on the edge of being crazy. So we're going to be ultra crazy and do 3 layers of it. Yeah, I know. This is stuff that tends to slide out of position, so you really have to kind of manage it. All right, so 3 layers of canvas binding tape, and I've got the screen the wrong way. I'm just going to see if you guys can see how thick that stuff is. Oh, we're too far out. Gumdrops. There we go. I didn't know what I was doing. See how thick that is? So we're going through 3 layers of this. Let's see how Tony's 201-2 does on a task like this that would send other machines, including some vintage, screaming, going, no! Yes! Here we go. Okay, I gave it a little bit of gas. I wasn't ridiculous, just a little bit of gas. Yeah, I'm going to say it again. On this song, I always see a front porch with a big jug of lemonade, and there's a dog, obviously. There's got to be a dog on the porch. You know what I mean? You're playing a song like that. There's got to be a dog. Okay, so let's take a look at these stitches. Again, look at from the side. Look at from the side. Once I get my thumb out of the way, look at this from the side. What we just sewed through. 3 layers of canvas binding tape, and we're talking probably about 6 ounces as far as the thickness. Crazy. And yet Tony's machine got the job done so ridiculously easy. You'd be like, what did we just sew? Some cotton? No. We just did commercial grade binding tape that's used for ultimate durability. And this machine got it done just like a hiccup. Just like a hiccup. All right, so the next one is called Lullaby Bye. I'm not stuttering. Lullaby Bye. Let's take a look at these stitches. Folks, it just doesn't get any better than that. And we're talking through 3 layers of this canvas binding tape. Look at it from the top. You can't even really see the thickness there. Alright, so let's come out on the shot a little bit. We'll turn it around and look at the lock stitch. I'll just kind of lean this. Well, I can show you when we get done with the other side. The spacing, the formation, is just absolutely spot on. Exactly the way we want to see it. And again, we're talking 3 layers of this stuff, folks. The thick of thick. I'm going to come out on this shot just a little bit and just kind of tilt the material, but this is a definite pass. Absolutely crazy. Gorgeous stitching in every respect. So I'm going to throw that to the rear. And since we really want to focus on the power of Tony's machine, or I should say the renewed power of Tony's machine, I should probably also look at doing some of that compressed felt, right? Because that stuff definitely puts a machine to the test. Definitely puts a machine to the test. Okay, so here's some of our compressed felt. I'm going to go ahead and do 3 layers of this. I'm going to go ahead and fold it in the middle and fold it again. And that's what we're going to be going through right there, folks. 3 layers of this stuff. And I think I'm just going to buzz down because I'm kind of mindful of my battery that continues to plague me, and I want to make sure that we can get all the other stuff done as well. So I'm going to, well, what the heck, we'll go down and around. Let's do it. So we're going to do this compressed felt on Tony's 201-2. Let's head down and around. Here we go. Yes, I stopped in time. Hey! Yay! Well, I didn't that time. See that? You get a little bit cocky and then all of a sudden... Yeah, bummer. Alright, I'm going to try to get back on the road here. I'm off the road. Here we go. Yes, I pushed the pedal a little bit more that time. Almost sewed over my thread again. Alright, let's see how Tony's machine did on this compressed felt. This compressed felt. Do my little thread clips first. So here's our top stitch. I'm going to kind of bend this back a little bit. It kind of, when you sew it like this, it kind of puckers up. You can see it in the middle. There we go. I think I got it stable. So we'll see how Tony's machine did. I mean, it obviously made it look really, really easy. It was like, wow, that was it? We're done? But it also laid down a gorgeous stitch. Look at the quality of that stitch. The spacing, the formation, the integrity of the stitch is absolutely as it should be. Then we go down and around. Kind of see the edge here, how thick it is. Ridiculously thick. And yet that machine just got it done so easily. Again, no effort whatsoever. So we're kind of coming down this bottom row now. And again, you can see just a perfect stitch all the way down. Exactly as it should be. I'll come out on this shot a little bit so you can see the stitching in totality, which I think it just presents beautifully, don't you? Now we're going to turn it over and look at this lock stitch. And with compressed felt, sometimes that upper tension can actually work a little bit harder than that bobbin case tension. And so you'll sometimes see that stitch popping a little bit more on the lock stitch. And so it might require a little bit of an adjustment, because again, you want it to be balanced. But that is an absolutely gorgeous lock stitch. As you look at the material kind of distorting there, we have to kind of track it along. But that's exactly what we want to be seeing. That is spot on. The spacing, the formation, the integrity of the stitch, exactly as we want to see it. And there you can see the stitching in totality. Just like the top stitch is just absolutely drop dead gorgeous. And this doesn't happen by chance, folks. And it's not a one-off. This 201-2 of Tony's can do this every single time, whether it's compressed felt or commercial grade canvas binding tape, blah, 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 or that nightmare material, or the genuine elk hide, or the nylon webbing. It just doesn't matter. When the machine is properly prepared, it can do the job exactly the same every time you sit down to it. Like I've said before, you don't have to sit down to the machine and go, I wonder if it's going to be a good day for Betsy today, or if it's going to be a bad day. You can know that you're going to get consistent outcomes every single time when the machine has been restored at the workshop. All right, let's keep marching forward, because we got to be mindful of that doggone battery. The battery that continues to plague me even after I replaced it. I have to see if I can get a bypass where I can plug directly into electricity instead of using a battery. Then I don't have to worry about it. You just have to worry then about the size of the card, the SD card. So, all right. So, as has been requested before by Piper and others, Piper is a friend of mine from Canada. You guys like to see the thin materials as well. So here I've got some of this cotton blend, and you can see from the side, it's paper thin, super paper thin. So we're going to just buzz around on this a little bit for fun, and we'll see how Tony's machine does with a material that is super duper thin. You know, if it does as well as the heavy grade material, we'll see. All right, here we go. Should we have a little bit of music on? I just feel like it's so quiet. Yeah, let's do it. What did I just play? Lullaby by? No, I didn't. This is new. You just turn it way down. So this is Lullaby by. Or did I just play this? I might have just played this. I'm pretty sure I did. Let's play Bridges instead. Oh, this is perfect for this type of sewing. Here we go. Don't you love that? Oh boy, you don't love that. That was like, you went off course, Scott. You went off course, buddy. You went off course again. What the heck? All right, we're just going to go wild now. We're not going to be concerned about going off course anymore. We're just going to go wild, folks. Oh boy, we went really off course there. That was weird. There we go. I'm going to stop there while I'm not really ahead, but sort of. We'll see. Boy, that is a happy potted motor, isn't it? It is just like, come on, let's go! Let's go! Oh boy, I just went totally off the material over there. Alright, let's give this a clip. I think the music got me a little bit too excited. Yeah, that's what I'm sticking with. Alright, I have no idea which end is our top stitch. I think this is our top stitch. And I'm just going to kind of hold it because there's no way you can get this stuff to stand up. It just doesn't do it. So you can just see we just kind of buzzed around for fun. The stitch definition, the stitch spacing, and everything about the stitch is just absolutely spot on. Exactly the way we want to see it. And as we turn it over, there's just no difference with that lock stitch. The lock stitch is just absolutely spot on as well. The spacing, the formation. Even as we were kind of buzzing around and just goofing off, it laid down a beautiful stitch all the way around through a paper thin material. So again, I'm very pleased with Tony's 201-2 and how it performed, laying down gorgeous stitching on both thick materials and then also this paper thin material as well. So definite pass. I'm going to throw it to the back with all the other sew-offs that we've done so far. And I'm going to put on a little bit more music, and then we're going to, this one is called Tiptoe Out the Back. Let's see what this one sounds like. Okay, let me make sure my shot is right. This is a fun song. I'm liking this a lot. All right, I'm going to turn it up and just be a rebel. I'm going to be a rebel. All right, I'll be good, I'll be good, I'll be good. Dr. Singer started to give me a real serious look, kind of a scowl. Blah. All right, let's move on to our next material, which is kind of a vinyl material. Got a little bit of a stretchiness to it. You kind of see it through the camera there. Again, we're kind of like looking at an alligator skin almost. But instead of having that suede on the back, that real furry stuff, it's got more of a smooth surface. So I'm going to give this a go. It probably won't give us as much of a challenge as that other material, hopefully not. And we'll kind of go down and around. All right, are you ready? All right, here we go. And I'm going to really try to harness the power this time so I can show that you don't have to blast it. Almost went off the end again. Almost went off the end again. This potted motor is just ready to rock and roll. Okay, I can't be good. Especially with this music. Listen. Yeah. Ha ha! Woo! Oh, it's a drum part and I'm busy right now. Doggone it. Nice, nice. I'm gonna have to remember that one. That's a beautiful, beautiful song. That's awesome. And this is pretty paper thin as well. You can kind of see that from the side. That's real thin stuff. So I'm gonna see if I can get this to stand up, hopefully. I doubt it. And we'll see if we can take, yeah, it's not going to cooperate. Bah! What can I, ah, brilliant! We'll use our Rolls Royce to support it in the back. Aha! See, it's not just a pretty car, it's also functional! Alright, so let's take a look at this, and this again is kind of a vinyl material. I could see being used again in kind of furniture applications like the other stuff. And we'll see how Tony's machine did with this. Absolutely gorgeous. Look at that stuff. It's just like alligator scales, basically. Absolutely spot on. And we'll look at the stitching in totality, and then I'll spin it around. And we'll look at that lock stitch with the help of our faithful Rolls Royce, which is allowing us to balance it on the machine. Alright, let's zoom in on this and take a look at this as well. This again is our lock stitch, which is absolutely perfect. Go down to that bottom row. That's exactly what we want to be seeing, folks. Again, in totality, you can just look at the stitch quality, the formation, the consistency of it. And that's exactly what we want to see. It's spot on, as is the top stitch as well. And thank you for the help there, Mr. Rolls Royce. What do you mean you want to stay on the bed when we finish off the last sew-offs? Actually, it is kind of cool with your tires right there by the needle. I don't know. I don't know if the material will clear your tires. What are we going to do then? I'm willing to try anything once. We'll give it a go. What are we going to sew next? It's probably going to be impossible. Okay. What is this? Tiptoe out the back. Okay, this next one is called quarter like the coin, quarter mix. Turn it way down. Alright, I'm going to back our Rolls Royce up just slightly because I got a little bit wider. And I'm going to widen our shot a little bit so I can get the Rolls Royce in as well. And then I'll zoom in. Right about there is good. Okay, what should we do next? Maybe do some leather? Or should we do our U.S. Army grade canvas? Why don't we do our U.S. Army grade canvas? So I've got 2 layers. I'm going to go ahead and fold it. How would I do this? I'm going to fold it like this. I think I'm going to do 6 layers. This machine could do a lot more than that, but I think it'll just be easier for me to fold it like this. But still, we're talking about a task that is no easy task for this machine, or any machine for that matter. You can kind of look at it from the side as well. So let's sew this with the Rolls Royce on the sewing bed, and we'll see if it inspires our machine to do even more. You never know. I should say Tony's machine to do more. Alright, here we go. We got about 6 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas being assisted and monitored and inspired by a Phantom II Rolls Royce. Here we go. Yeah, I think it was inspired a little bit. Maybe. I do see one thing though, and that is I'm going to make a slight adjustment on upper tension. I'm going to back it off a little bit because it actually caused our stitch definition to be reduced a little bit. I bumped it up a little bit on the compressed felt, and then I never adjusted it back. So I'm going to make a slight adjustment, which I just did, and I'm going to buzz down one more time so we can compare the 2 rows together. This is our first row on top, and now I'm going to lay down the second row just here on the bottom. Matter of fact, I'll put a little mark so we know which one it is. Actually, I'll mark it on both ends. There's our X there. See that X? And our X on the other side. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit now. And we'll buzz down one more time now that I've adjusted the upper tension back slightly so that it's not overpowering the bobbin pull. It's a good stitch, but I see a couple spots where it's evident that that bobbin is fighting really hard to try to keep up with that upper tension increase. And we don't want that. We want to have it balanced. So I'm lining right up on the X. There's our X right there. And my screen is facing the wrong way. Yep, you can see the X very clearly. We're going to buzz down one more time with that slight upper tension adjustment and then compare the two rows. Okay, here we go. Oops, let me get my take-up arm all the way up. There we go. Okay, here we go. Perfect. Excellent, excellent, excellent. That's exactly that's exactly the adjustment that I wanted to make to show you how a slight tweak in your tensioning can change the outcome dramatically. Not necessarily for the lock stitch in this instance, because in this instance the upper tension was dominant, so we're going to see a slight variation as far as that top stitch, just slight. You go ahead and line this up with the Rolls Royce and with the clippers. And again, the row on top is our second sew off. The row on the bottom is our first sew off. So we're going to look at the bottom one first because that was our first one. So the stitching looks really good to start, but then we see right about there, get that steady, right about there, and those are not missed stitches. That's where the bobbin was struggling to keep up with the upper tension, and so these stitches right here are not defined properly. See that? They're not defined properly, and that's because the upper tension was too high and it was pulling against the bobbin, and it gave us an inconsistent outcome. And then on that upper row, we're going to see where I made that slight adjustment and I took some of the victory away from the upper tension and I gave it back to the bobbin so it could define that top stitch better. And now all of a sudden, look. Absolute perfection. Look at the bottom row, look at the top row. The top row is our second row after I made the adjustment. See the X? The bottom row is our first one where we had a little bit of an anomaly right about there. And you can see top to bottom, the top one on the top is where I made the adjustment. The one on the bottom is the original one. And we got that anomaly right there in those stitches that are undefined. So some things are easy to fix. Some things are easy to fix and you can get a great outcome with just a subtle adjustment if you know what to do. And if you watch this channel regularly, you know what to do. So I'm going to turn it over now and you can look at the lock stitch. And again, because the upper tension was set too high, we should see some really good looking lock stitches. We shouldn't see any anomalies. There should be no anomalies at all with the lock stitch because it was an upper tension being set too high issue, which is going to emphasize or polarize that lock stitch even more. So as we go across, I'm just going to look at both of them at the same time because my battery is getting really low. And as suspected, the lock stitch looks absolutely perfect. And on the back of this US Army grade canvas, you get a little bit, see that little napping a little bit? It almost gets kind of a nappy look to it. But again, because the upper tension was dominant, we've got a good looking lock stitch on both lines of stitches. There's no anomaly. So again, just think of it again as a tug of war. Think of it again as a tug of war where if you have that upper tension too high, it's going to be pulling that thread up and overemphasizing the definition of that lock stitch. If you have your bobbin tension either too high or you have your upper tension too low, you're going to get an undefined lock stitch, something that's not going to look really good. So I'm going to move that out of the way. Pick up our Rolls Royce just temporarily here. So it was really a pleasure. I had one more sew off I was going to do, but I'm just going to forego it. I'm going to set this Rolls Royce up right over here near the needle so that we don't block the filigree in the front. And again, Tony, I really appreciate the opportunity of helping with another one of your machines. Come on in this shot. Again, our journey kind of began with the Spartan, and now we've gone to this 201. And next, we're going to be focusing on your 1591. I believe it was the Centennial model, which is kind of fun. And that's about it. So let me put on one last song as we part ways. This is be called River Changes. River Changes. The Rolls Royce of Singers sewing machines. Oh, what the heck. Let's do the last sew off real quick before the music ends. Come on. I can't see the foot control. It's dark. Dr. Singer, help! Help, Dr. Singer! Ha To the finish line! Yeah, baby. Yeah. Uh-huh. Where are we? Woo! Beautiful stitching! Beautiful stitching! It's so beautiful, so beautiful. We had to get that last stitch off in, you know what I mean, folks? Just had to. Ha ha! Quickly! The lock stitch before the music ends! Oh! Gosh, you can't see anything anyway. That's a bummer. Alright, folks. Stay tuned for other great premieres like this, where we're serious and goofy all at the same time. Plus, we have Rolls Royces. Try to beat that, buddy. God bless.